Good evening, TDN listeners and viewers to this weekend interview. Welcome to another episode of this weekend interview with your host and guide, Anthony Drago. It's Wednesday night, and when Wednesday night comes around, we have discussions. We talk about interesting topics, and of course, we bring you folks who have so much to share, folks who have accomplished and achieved so much, and I get to have a conversation with them. I get to share those conversations with you. Makes me a very fortunate person. Tonight is no exception. My guest tonight is no stranger to this weekend interview. It's Mr. Alvin Thomas. And tonight we're going to talk about institutions and the role that institutions are supposed to play in a democracy. In a Dominican context, we are going to discuss it. We're going to look at a few of them: the Postal Service, the National Bank, Social Security, the media, um, planning, audit, all of those institutions, the courts. What do you think? Do you think that the institutions in Dominica are healthy and therefore they make a healthy contribution towards our democracy? Or or do you not agree? So stay tuned and we'll be right back. Grab your water, text somebody, let them know that this weekend interview is on, and we'll be right back.
Presented by People say I've got a People say I've People say I've got a great smile. Well, I have to say, this is all thanks to the professional team at Beacon Dental Group right here in Dorchester, Massachusetts. I've got world-class dental care. Beacon Dental Group has expert and caring staff dedicated to providing the most advanced and satisfactory treatment in all aspects of oral health. Their services are designed to meet your needs and give you a perfect smile, too. General checkups, cosmetic surgery, Gemini laser service, and advanced procedures, all in a state-of-the-art facility. Call or visit Beacon Dental Group today, 1026 Blue Hill Avenue, Dorchester, Massachusetts, or call 617-2.
How much Dominican history do you know? Want to learn some fun facts? We have a great and fun way to test your knowledge and learn more about our history. Get your copy of Dominic Anu, Dominica in Puzzle. Fun for the whole family. Available now on Amazon.com. Visit pushpast10.com to learn more. Email us at dominicainpuzzle@gmail.com or call 877-698-9894.
All right, welcome back, listeners. I hope you had the opportunity to get your favorite drink and your beverage. Text somebody, let them know that this weekend interview is on. If you're listening to us on YouTube, TDN Network 1, Just give us a like, give us a subscribe, hit the notification bell so you can know when we come on. Similarly, with Facebook, follow us, give us a like, drop a comment, let people know that we are there. Those of you who are joining us from Dominica on RVR Jams, DigiPlay Channel 59, welcome. And in Toronto, online radio SPE, and welcome to you as well. Hope you everyone is having a wonderful week so far. On Instagram, you can find us on TDN Radio Caribbean. So at TDN Radio Caribbean on Instagram. We're also on Roku and some of the other specialized um, social media platform. I say especially because certain people use them, and believe it or not, that's what some people use to watch their favorite programs and their podcasts and that sort of thing. So welcome. I hope that you are gearing up for to say bye bye to the colder climates. Those of you who are in North America, and you welcome spring and looking forward to the summer. And those of you who lost loved ones in the last week, our sincere condolences. Our hearts go out to you. There are a number of folks, you know yourself, um, who are mourning the passing of loved ones. Hold strong. Hope your memories of them are going to carry you steadfast through these difficult times, and then you're going to reminisce on the time that you spent together and start feeling better. But those of you who are celebrating birthdays and other types of activities, happy birthday to you. Memorable times. Take a time to celebrate. Take some time to celebrate. So, welcome. As I said before, we took the quick break. Tonight, we are discussing institutions, Dominican institutions, particularly. What roles do institutions play? And of course, we know in the governance um, of a country, there are different aspects of governance. There's, of course, what we call government, which is a politically elected set of individuals that make majority of decisions on our behalf. Our resources are getting spent and that sort of thing. But we also have also different arms. We have an opposition, if in parliament, and then we have specialized committees and commissions and organizations that help to make things work. So, for example, the Electoral Commission is supposed to comprise of folks who have an interest in the most important process of elections and making sure that when you cast your vote, your your opinion gets the full weight that you intended for it to get, that the process leading up to election, the process of elections, the process after elections are free and fair and free from fear. You have money institutions that help us to be able to do our savings, to get loans, to finance our businesses, um, to build our homes and so on. That financial sector and the organizations within there, those financial institutions, are seriously important. You have the private sector, people who are entrepreneurial in spirit and they pull their resources together and they invest and provide what they perceive to be a much needed service to the community. And in exchange for a promise, higher return than they would just get on a 9 to 5 job where they exchange time for money. Um, excuse me, other institutions more important to democracy, the media, radio stations, newspapers, nowadays online radio stations. Um, we have uh, you know that aspect that brings information to the public. So very important role. I think the media has more of an important role than they sometimes realize. And of course, big shout out to one of my regular fans out here, Miss Eunice in St. Thomas. She's the editor of one of the major newspapers out there. And they have Dominican News Online, you have Q95, you have TDN Radio. We bring you information, and hopefully that's the information you use to help you make informed decisions. So the media has an outsized role. And of course, if you have a robust media, then the government um, not really is afraid, but they give respect to the media because they know your reporting on their actions and attitudes will impact the views of the general public, and then therefore result in people making different decisions when they go to elections. So the media is supposed to be that. The courts affect everything because even a while ago we spoke about business and entrepreneurial and people investing. One of the things that will really discourage someone to take that risk is if they perceive that when I take a risk, um, someone is unfair to me. I cannot get, I cannot expect to get what I perceive to be justice. Take them to court and get the court to listen to both sides and make um, what mostly people would consider to be a fair judgment. Sometimes your judgment might not be in your favor, but if you can draw the line from what was presented and how it was presented to the conclusion that was drawn, it doesn't make it any easier to take that you lost the case, but it's a lot worse if you think you lost the case and you don't feel like you got your fair chance to make your case and therefore a fair chance to have a different outcome. So the courts are also a very important institution. Of course, you have services. In a modern society, for example, you have electricity, you have water, you have communication devices, communication systems, and those are also essential institutions. And in countries like Dominica, where currently the government owns the electric company, the government owns the biggest radio station, um, we have to be careful how those things are, those institutions are managed so that folks can feel that when they get information from the media and then they get service from the utilities, that their resources are well spent for their benefit. And so that's what we're discussing tonight: institutions, and in the state of the institutions and how it's affecting daily lives, how it's affecting our long-term view of life, how it's affecting our ability to be aspirational. So, for example, Dominica is going to be 50 years independence in a few years. As a young person getting out of school or just starting off in a career, just starting a family, or even an older couple with young children, what's their outlook on the prospects for the future of the country is going to impact what they do. So are they going to invest and build a home? If they are, they're going to build a home that they expect to have for the rest of their lives and retire in and pass on to their kids. Or would they feel like because prospects in the country are so slim, most likely a kid is going to im- migrate to another country, and then what's the point in putting down this big house? And then when they get older, their kids are not around, or they die, the house goes into disrepair, it becomes decrepit, and so on. So a lot of those things. That's what we'll be looking at. That's what we're going to be looking at today, where those institutions in Dominica, how can we do a better job of they doing they're playing their role. So my guest tonight on this weekend interview is Mr. Alvin Thomas. It looks like he's having trouble connecting. So I'll just continue with the bowling. I'll bowl from both ends until he comes on. Lately I was listening to the radio and there was a lot of calls about the postal service in Dominica that a lot of, I don't know, I have not, I tried verifying and I wasn't able to, but you can correct me if I'm wrong or if you are familiar with it. Um, that says that folks were having trouble mailing stuff out of Dominica, the postal service. especially for outgoing mail, was practically non-functional. And that bold me to continue the analogy we have. Brother Owen Prosper, welcome. You're always on. Thank you for that. Hope you're having a great week so far. But when when you say that we have a postal service that is not functioning properly, folks are saying that in order to get packages and letters out of Dominica, they have to use private um, i- organizations such as UPS and FedEx and so on. What is that about? You know, a postal service exists in almost all countries. Even some of these remote islands have regular postal service. I remember when my friend was still with us, he had done some studies in one of those remote islands in the Pacific, and he said the boat would come with mail once every 6 weeks. But at least you know it was coming once every 6 weeks, so it was regular. And so when I heard that, I was flawed. And my friend, my good friend, Mr. Alvin Thomas, was Postmaster General in Dominica for a while there, and we I invited him on to give us a little background information in general of how the postal service work, because I can imagine there's a huge um, mechanism behind the postal service worldwide. Because let's say you are in I don't know, in UAE or in Dubai, you want and you mail something, you drop it in a post office, you're pretty confident that it's going to get to the destination it's going to get to. I mean, mails get lost, and sometimes you have nefarious people that work at those institutions, and there may be some theft. But in general, people have a very high confidence that when you see postal service of a country, you drop a postcard, you drop a contract, you drop something important in the mail, you know there's a 98% chance it's going to get to its destination. So when I heard that they were having issues administering the postal service in Dominica, that really had me um, scratching my head. And then right on the heels of that, there's a lot of talk going on about the National Bank, almost the only bank in Dominica right now, the main bank, because even the credit unions bank at the National Bank, and there are issues with them getting their books together and being able to properly report to the public and shareholders and that sort of thing. And then right on the heels of that, there was some rumors going around about some loan that was given to an individual from the Social Security. And we know the fiasco that's going on with electoral reform. We saw the debacle last year with Domlek, with a whole lot of blackouts. We cannot even call it loan shedding; we have to call it blackouts. We see the government not being able to produce audited reports on time. We see scathing reports from judges about the magistrate courts, and we hear stories of folks who are remanded at the state prison awaiting trial for up to 7 years. And we see sometimes the people are there for so long without trial that the director of public prosecution has to dismiss cases. Um, and so there are so many institutions in Dominica that just cry out for attention and and so on. So that's what we want to talk about tonight. And you know, what is that doing to our quality of life? What is that doing to the prospects of the country and all of that? So my guest seems like he's with us right now, Mr. Alvin Thomas. He's no stranger to TDN. He's no stranger to this week in interview. Totally knowledgeable. Alvin was Postmaster General in Dominica. He also served as Assistant Secretary in the Ministry of Tourism. And one of the feathers he has in his cap is that the famous World Creole Music Festival was conceived and had its genesis during his period of time as the Assistant Secretary in the Ministry of Tourism. He was also the General Secretary of the Public Service Union at the time. I think we called it CSA, And I can just go on and on and on and on and on. And, he's somebody that is well versed in the runnings of the country from his various positions. And so he can talk to us knowledgeably about institutions and their roles, and when they are well run, what difference they make as opposed to when they are neglected and are made toothless, if you want to call it that. So, Alvin, welcome to this weekend interview. Always a pleasure to have you on, my brother.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Loud and clear.
Loud and clear. All right. I don't have to increase the natural volume.
I, I I don't know. I don't think it's possible
I
for you
don't
to.
need I don't need a mic, or an amplifier.
I was just going to say I don't think you can decrease it even if you wanted
That's
to.
one thing God bless me with, boy.
Volume.
But yes, it's a pleasure to be back on this weekend interview, Tony. It's always a pleasure to come and have those conversations. And not just for the sake of having the conversation. We're having these conversations, hopefully, that minds can change.
Right.
And we live in a world today where there is a lot of fake news, as they call it, and people shy away from the facts. And whenever I have the opportunity to come on your program, I always tend as much as possible to refer to the facts, to cite certain specific examples, to support some of my comments or what I have to say. And tonight will be no different. So thank you for having me, and I want to say a pleasant good evening to all your folks who have already tuned in and listening. I listened to your introductory comments, and I must say that any right-thinking Dominican, whether they're at home or abroad, should have concern with what's happening in Dominica at the moment. Um, it's not pleasant. It's not where we should be as a country, and I think those of us, as I normally say, and I may be saying it ad nauseum, to him much is given, much is expected. So there are some persons of us who should speak to those issues, whether collectively through their organizations or individually. Um, so having said that, Tony, let me begin. I always like to begin to refer to our Constitution. And we have a document called the Constitution. And not many of us take time off to familiarize ourselves with it. It's a sort of cumbersome document, one might say, and the average man may not be able to understand all of what's in there. But having said that, I still believe that every Dominican should familiarize themselves with it. Occasionally browse through it, see what it says in terms of how we should conduct ourselves as a republic, which is what we are. I know, speaking for the United States, there are a number of senators and congressmen, people who walk with the Constitution in their pocket. They especially the older ones, they tell you, hey, this is what we are guided by. And similarly, we have a written Constitution. In the preamble of our Constitution, the opening, the area that says, whereas the people of Dominica, that sought to determine who we are as a people and how we ought to conduct ourselves, even before it goes into the whole other things that are in there. At section C, there is A, B, C, D, E. At section C, it says, whereas the people of Dominica have asserted their belief in a democratic society in which all persons may, to the extent of their capacity, play some part in the institutions of the national life, and thus develop and maintain due respect for lawfully constituted authority. You hear those words here? Democratic society, all persons to the extent of their capacity, as I said, to him much is given, much is expected, play some part in institutions of national life. And by that, I will highlight what are some of those institutions, and thus and develop and maintain due respect for lawfully constituted authority. So when some persons choose to say, well, no law, no constitution, or they don't give a DAMN about constitution, and things are going the way it's going, it's a violation of our constitution. Clear violation of the preamble, the spirit of the constitution. Clear violation. And hence the reason why we ought to be concerned. You and I were both members of the Dominica JCs. I was fortunate. What's going on there? Let's.
No, we hear you over and clear. Go ahead.
Okay, I was fortunate and honored to be bestowed what is called JCI International Senator, and that's a very top, the highest ranking position in the organization. There are just few of us that hold that title. And in our creed, our JCI creed that you're familiar with, there's a tenet in it that says government must be of laws and not of men. You know that, Tony?
I know that for sure.
And we may not get into interpreting the creed, because every tenet of that creed speaks to something. We believe that faith in God gives meaning and purpose to human life. That's the first line, that there is a God, whether you want to call it Jah, Jehovah, whatever you want to call it. But there's something higher than yourself. Faith in God gives meaning and purpose to human life. That the brother of man transcends the sovereignty of nations. So I'm saying all of this to say that in any democratic society, there has to be a certain way in which life is conducted. And therefore, when I hear you mention some of the examples that you gave, the post office, as you said, yes, I was the postmaster general for a period in Dominica. The post office is in disarray. The bank is in some disarray. Social security is in disarray. The judicial system is in some disarray. Agriculture is in disarray. CBI is in disarray. Health is in disarray. Electoral reform is in disarray. I mean, how many have I counted there so far?
And we can go on, planning, proper planning of infrastructure, environmental, yeah. The media, everything.
So clearly, I want someone who may see otherwise to challenge me on those issues. And I can go in detail in each one of them. Each one of them I can go into detail and cite examples. That where we are today is not where we ought to be. It is not where we ought to be as a people. So a lot of us have comments and listen to what's happening in Haiti. And we give our 5 cents and our 10 cents on Haiti and say what Haiti is and what Haiti is not. But I'm afraid to say, though, Tony, that where Haiti is today didn't happen overnight. It took a period to get us to that, to get Haiti to that. And I'm afraid that we are treading on that, in that trajectory. We're treading in that direction. Because you have what you have in Dominica at the moment too, is that you have some of the so-called quote-unquote elite, meaning that those in authority, those who should do better, those who are making all the $100 million, you call them the elite of the society. They are aiding and abetting. And the average Joe Blow that is down there struggling, that possibly don't want to rock the boat. And I can understand. You have their little job in the public service. They maybe have a little job in the private sector.
Yeah, maybe a little contract to get in some pit, scraps.
They get a little salary. They have to pay their mortgage, their child in school. The salary not even enough at the end of the month to pay the mortgage and to let them leave. They're going to be very cautious. Because if they see the elites are not doing and saying anything, then that's a problem. And I recall I was on a program not too long ago, and I said it very regrettably, I must say, that Dominica is heading into the direction of what one might describe or define as a failed state. And some folks challenge me on that and say, Alvin, how can you make a statement like that? And I was able, I pointed in a number of areas, which I will do again tonight.
Mm-hmm.
The basic definition of what may be constituted or what may be described as a failed state is a country whose government is considered to have failed at some of its basic responsibility. For example, keeping the legal system working correctly, providing public services, electricity, water, education, hospital, banking, you name it. And you mentioned all of those in your opening comment. You talk about DOMLEC. So when a government is looked at in that light, one may be quick to say, hey, that government is failing. We are in what may be considered a failed state. And let me just before I look at specifically to the areas that you mentioned as post office, which I will come to in a minute, let us look at some of our systems and institutions as a start. We have an electoral commission that is non-functioning. Non-functioning because the CCJ says so. It's not only Alvin that says so. The CCJ said that the tints in the elections should be removed before next election is called. So clearly the Electoral Commission is non-functional. They're not doing some of the basic stuff. And basic by that, clean the voters registry.
Yeah.
So we ensure that
the integrity of the people
the integrity of the vote and the list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And provide voters ID. These are things that they can do now under the current legislation. You don't need new laws to do that. But that is not being done. So they're non-functional. To the extent for the last 20 years, we've been attempting to have electoral reform. Last 20 years, we are the last. Every other country in the Caribbean have had, in some cases, more than one reform during that period of time. Antigua, I just learned a couple of weeks ago, was on their second round of re-registration, second or third in Antigua. We have for the last 2-3 elections, the number of persons on the list to vote is way more than what the population of the country
is. Yep.
So clearly the Electoral Commission not functioning. We have what is called an Integrity Commission. And that too is not functioning. We know the history of that. We know back 4 or 5 years ago, whatever that time frame might be, when an issue was brought before the Integrity Commission as it relates or affected the Prime Minister, some villas and all of that, and what happened then. And there was, I mean, all of that is documented. The commission was being chaired at the time by Julian Johnson and had some real eminent persons on the commission. As a matter of fact, it was a commission of 7. You had an accountant there, a person with legal mind, you know. That was undermined. And they went into parliament and changed the legislation and made the commission a 3-person commission.
From 7 to 3.
From 7 to 3.
Mm-hmm.
1 person appointed by the leader of the opposition, 1 by the prime minister, and the chairman appointed through joint whatever it is. 3, from 7 to 3. Since that time, the commission has not. And that is an important commission because that is where matters of corruptions can be first detected, because persons within a certain, there's a schedule of persons who are supposed to report their assets or on an annual basis, what they've earned, how they've earned it, and stuff like that.
Right.
To alleviate corruption.
Mm-hmm.
The Integrity Commission is not functioning. Then you have the judicial system, severely compromised. You just made mention of it. In the history of Dominica, and I don't think it has happened anywhere in the region, where you have a sitting justice, a sitting judge, gave a scathing comment review on the judicial system in Dominica. And those of you who may not have read it, don't take my word for it. Some of the things that some of the comments that the judge made in as it relates to the judicial system in Dominica. He says, in responding to call to action, Dominica High Court Judge His Lordship Justice Colin William has boldly addressed the critical flaws which, according to him, undermine the essence of justice in Dominica judicial system.
And what date is that, Alvin? You have a date
That
on
is
that?
the one when he did in the
December of 2023. So
Yes.
that's 4 months ago.
Okay. And he did one in the September, after the September. So on two back to back he came with comments. And throughout the he went on. Listen to what he says. I just referred to the Constitution and the tenet in our JCI Creed. Yeah, what he says. So are we using time efficiently and effectively? He queried. I ask these questions as persons who are in the administration of justice and who must see things of a particular perspective as to how do we preserve the rule of law. You know what the judge is saying? That's a judge, sitting judge that's bold enough to make those comments. And that report is there. It's there for anybody to read.
And he spoke about people being remanded at the prison waiting for trial for years.
Yeah, as long as 10 years from 20, whatever it is today.
10 years.
14, 10 years.
So somebody is arrested for a crime. They haven't been tried. So because in Dominica, we say people are innocent until proven guilty, right?
That's right.
And we have them we don't have jail and prison. We have one prison.
Right.
We have them in prison for 10 years, even before they have had a trial.
That's right.
Suppose that person is found innocent when they go to trial.
But not only that, Tony, witnesses forget, witnesses die.
Exactly.
I mean,
that's what I'm saying. So
I think that happened in 2014 and in 2024. That's 10 years.
That's 10 years.
Somebody even forget what happened. Yeah, what he says again, his lordship left no room for ambiguity, asserting that the current state of affairs is untenable and demands immediate redress. This is your country, and we have to do better, the judge declared, echoing the sentiment of a nation yearning for a judicial system that upholds the rule of law in its truest form. So I will not go further on that, but to say that these were the words of a sitting justice as it relates to the rule of law in Dominica.
And let's put it in context, Alvin, because people might say, you are saying this because you don't like the government. I have you on my program because I have something against the government. The judge in court, one of his biggest responsibility is to ensure that people maintain confidence and faith in the judicial system.
That's right.
And so for him to feel that he needs to be so critical of the process at the risk of people being further disillusioned about the administration of justice, is probably much worse than what he's saying in his report. And so, as you said when you started, that there's so much going on that anybody in Dominica, anybody who cares about Dominica, should have deep concern about some of these things that we are highlighting here tonight.
Absolutely. And hear what he says. He says, hear what he says, just to respond to what you just said. But when we're afraid to tell those who are responsible that they're not doing what they're supposed to do, when we try to shield people, this is the problem he asserted. We know where the problem is, but nobody wants to say, because people are afraid to say to their friends, you're playing the fool man. And that is the crux of the matter. So
and in the meantime, people are suffering and languishing.
Exactly. So it's not the question of whether you like this person. It's speaking truth to justice.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what he's doing. And like I said, I think it's unprecedented that you have a sitting judge making those kind of comments about a judicial system of which he is part of and have to administer. But
Yes.
basically saying, look, guys, I don't want to be a part of that. And here are the deficiencies I'm seeing, and those deficiencies need to be addressed immediately. So let's just go back again to some of the other institutions and systems. You have a Public and Police Service Commission that is riddled with nepotism. We know what's happening in the police force. We don't need to elaborate on that. We know what's happening in the public service. 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, the PSU had a meeting, and among the issues that they had on the agenda to discuss was the non-appointment of persons, the long tenure of people. You have what is called an NEP program, and people are in that program for like 10, 12 years. No tenure. You think this person can go to the bank and get a loan for a mortgage? You'd have a little side job, no appointment. People acting is like in Hollywood. So a lot of nepotism. It's who you know, and the PM send me or the minister send me, and that is so unfortunate. You have a local government system that is compromised. We hear what's happening in some of the local government system. Even there,
You're talking about the village councils.
yes, village council, local government. Even there, you find sometimes government wants to infiltrate, not as government, but as political hackies in the system. Okay. You also have.
I remember a few years ago in Lapland when they had the village council election in Lapland, because the person who was in line, who was going to be chosen, most likely to be chosen as the chairman, was not in the favor of the people in power. They stymied the efforts on 2 separate occasions, and then appointed somebody who had lost. The person had contested the election, did not get enough votes to be on the council. That person was appointed and made chairman of the village council.
Yeah. That's unheard of. Then you have you have the non-appointment of, and this government, they might argue and say, well, there were governments before them that failed to do it, but that is no excuse. The non-appointment of a parliamentary commissioner, as keeping with the Constitution. Again, that is a provision in the Constitution. And you know, there is a specific role and function of the parliamentary commissioner. That is where the average Joe Blow man could go to and say, hey, I'm being penalized as a citizen. This is what it is. So for example, this question that was raised by the judge as it relates to persons being on remand for that long, where they may have no access to legal representation. Some may have or may not have, although the state has a duty to provide representation to an individual. But I mean, who is advocating for this individual that's languishing there for 10 years, 6 years, 7 years? Who is advocating for him or her? Who? To say, hey, we got to do something. And if we had a parliamentary commission as is required by the Constitution, this person or their family could take it to the parliamentary commissioner. And that would be his or her function to investigate and find out, well, why is it that this person is being denied his human rights?
But in absence of that, though, in the absence of that, then should be a robust media.
Absolutely. And as you talk about media, there is one other area that we don't have in Dominica. We don't have any laws in Dominica access to information. I think Belize has, if I'm not mistaken. I think Bahamas, if I'm not mistaken. I don't have the list before me.
Freedom of Information Act.
Freedom of Information Act. So again, they may argue, well, others will have it. But in the absence of a Freedom of Information Act, you can demand of these public officials that they
So,
have to provide that information.
so and keeping in that, Alvin. So, for example, you remember a few years ago, the leader of the opposition took the government to task, highlighting the number of passports that were being sold under the economic citizenship program, and he got his data from the Gazette, because
Yeah.
every passport that's issued is supposed to be published in the Gazette. And so the number that he cited was difficult to dispute because it's in the Gazette. So guess what the reaction was? The passports that are issued are no longer published in the Gazette.
Yeah. Go ahead. Okay.
No, no, no. So that's what I'm saying. That
Yeah, you're
I,
not.
I am further supporting what you say. They don't have a parliamentary commission that you can go to if you're grievance. All right. We don't have a strong media that people can go to. And
Yeah.
when you get to say, okay, the few laws and regulations that are in place, so for example, to publish stuff in the Gazette and whatever, the government exercises whatever privilege they have and just choose not to do it anymore. Or you're using the numbers in the Gazette to say what you
Your
want to
audio
say.
is muffling a bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
So that's what I just wanted to
Yeah, it's
point
better
out
now.
that, yeah, I wanted to point
No, no,
that out.
you are absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. Bear in mind, these guys must understand that when they're elected to public office, they're the servant of the people. And nothing that they do ought to be secret to the people. They're acting on behalf of the people. So with the Freedom of Information Act, they're obligated to provide information. So when whether it's in the parliament where the opposition stands and asks, well, whatever, and like you say, in the absence of that and not having a strong media, that you cannot challenge the government and the minister to provide information on specific matters. So that's an institution failure. Then you have the inadequate, as we said earlier, which I have, and a compromised electoral system. So, and then you have a demoralized and inefficient public service. That's another huge problem. You're in the 2020, in the 2020, let's see which one now. I'm trying to see which one that is. Um, yeah, in the 2020 audit report of Dominica, ending June 30th, 2020, the auditors gave a scathing, I tell you, report on the embassy in New York, the consulate, the permanent mission to the United Nations and consulate of the Commonwealth of Dominica in New York. Scathing report for the period July 1st, 2014 to April 30th, 2019. From 2014 to 2019, almost 5 years. And that information, again, is there in the Director of Audit report. It's not Alvin saying what he wants. And when you read that report, you can see so many violations of the Finance Act, Stores Regulation Act. I mean, just violation upon violation upon violation. But guess what? This person was recalled from New York, brought to Dominica, and made a permanent secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, a permanent secretary. They were in the consulate, badly managed. And we don't have time to go through the report, but at some point we can go through the report with a fine-tooth comb. And you brought this person in and you made them a permanent secretary. Then I understand they transferred this person as chief personnel officer, CPO, another major critical
Major.
position.
That's like the HR manager for the government,
Exactly.
human resources.
No knowledge, experience, training in industrial relations, laws, constitution, nothing. And what you have now in the service is a bunch of folks that are brought in, again, nepotism, and made a permanent secretary in the service. That too is a subject we can discuss in more detail.
Yeah. Yeah.
the role of a permanent secretary in the administration of government. And gone are the days when you had the Masterville Doctrove, the Ozzie Sim, the Julian Johnson, the Elod William, the Jennifer Astafans, the Kenneth Richards, you name it, on
Those
and
are
on and on and on.
what about those people that you're calling the names now?
Well, these people who were careered public officers.
Career public officers.
Yes,
Mhm.
that bear no allegiance to any party or politicians
In the
and
execution of their work.
in the execution of their duties. And at some point, as I said, we can do a session on that. Yes, I understand the permanent secretary is to advise the minister and to be his ears and mouth and whatever,
Mhm.
but only to the extent that you're doing so in the execution of your duty as a permanent secretary in the government, and not as a supporter of Joe Blow, who is a parliamentary person in a constituency and supporting labor practices. When the dust is settled after an elections, and whichever party wins, you become the government of all the people. You're no longer a government of who supported you or who voted for you and all this nonsense you have where
Right.
government will go to a function where they may be doing a handing over ceremony of public buildings or whatever it is, from the minister all the way down to the supporters addressed in the color of their party. I mean, this is ridiculous. Even permanent secretaries indulge in that. We'll go to a function and be all dressed up in red hat, red shoes, red bag, and all that kind of nonsense. So
Perceiving
that
that
is where we
that's
are
what they
today.
have to do to show their allegiance and solidarity and
You
so
would have
forth.
never had, may his soul rest in peace, Clancy Signoret wearing red. You know Mr. Signoret very well.
Yep, that's my
You have
mentor.
seen Mr.
Mhm.
Signoret, and Mr. Signoret served under several governments. You had Vernon Shaw. Mr. Shaw served under several governments. Would you have ever seen Mr. Shaw in
In
red
blue or
or
red or
blue
green,
or
yeah.
something like
Mhm.
that? So that is where we are in the public service. So those systems and institutions have been compromised. And it's time.
Deliberately so that they cannot have the backbone to challenge. If we go to parliament, you have the Speaker of the House. The Speaker of the House ran for election on the ticket of a party. He lost the election, and then he's appointed Speaker.
Yes,
How neutral can you expect that person to be? It's
uh,
clearly that he comes from one side.
very compromised. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you have, for example, last year I saw an advertisement advertising the position of chief personnel officer, the vacancy. Apparently, there was an open advertisement out there for persons to apply. Now, I worked in the public service, and I mentioned a few names. The public service has been what is called a career tenured service. So you come in as a junior clerk and you do whatever training, you attain whatever training and
Experience and so on.
experience, a whole combination of stuff. And you end up being a senior clerk. And then you might move to executive officer, senior executive officer, assistant secretary. And you've done all that in the service over a period of time. And then you become material for a PS. And within the PSs now, you would most likely have someone there that you would make CPO, Chief Personnel Officer,
Chief Personnel Officer.
and then or CABSEC as head of the service. Okay, there is a committee of permanent secretaries, and the CABSEC de facto is considered the head of the civil service. So the names I mentioned, for example, like Clancy Signoret, came in years ago in the service as maybe just an entry clerk or what have you, and over the years, made it all the way up to CABSEC and even president of the country. You had Crispin Sorrento, all those persons, So what you have now is a complete departure. And what that does now, it undermines the efficiency and effectiveness of the service.
And
So you have,
therefore,
for example,
we reaping the rewards where so
yes,
many institutions are failing
exactly, because
because the people who are supposed to run it don't have the requisite experience to
exactly,
be at the head of that.
exactly.
Mhm.
They don't have the experience and the thing. And what you find is that when you are permanent secretary, for example, as I said, your main function is to advise. Well, first of all, you're an accounting officer, so you are by law are responsible for the day-to-day running of the ministry, and that includes that you can be legally charged for inefficiency or not functioning or not doing what you're supposed to do under the law. It's in the act. Okay? To the extent whereby you as a permanent secretary, again, it's in the act. If the minister, you should not allow your minister to have you do something that is wrong or illegal. You
Right.
should be man enough to say to your minister, Mr. Minister, that's against the law. We cannot do that. And if the minister insists,
To just interrupt you for a minute, let's in an analogy where somebody can understand. Let's say you are a nurse and you're in the hospital and a patient come and he presents with whatever condition, high blood pressure, high blood sugar, whatever it is. And the doctor comes and he tells you we are going to administer X, Y, and Z. But because you are an experienced nurse, you know that what the doctor is prescribing is going to aggravate the patient because of his condition. You shouldn't just blindly follow it. You should tell the
absolutely,
doctor, doc, if we administer that medication, this is and so is what might happen.
absolutely.
That is similar to what you're saying.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
the law goes further to say that if the minister insists, because he's the minister, the ministry is his ministry, if he insists, you now, the permanent secretary, must put your objection in writing. You must
exactly.
document that and send a copy to the Public Accounts Committee and the director, and it says what you need to do, showing that, you know what, I told the minister he can't do that. It's against the law, but he insists he want to do it. I wash my hands. I'm not in it. So if tomorrow something happens, because at the end of the day, what this permanent secretary needs to understand is that when the minister may not be there as minister in the next 5 years or whatever, you are there as the permanent secretary. You're going to have to answer the question. And you receive that instrument of appointment from the president, of course, through the hands of the financial secretary, which is the main head figure of the accounting officers. So you're not just, and in addition to that, as a permanent secretary, or not rather, but the government oversees a number of statutory bodies or state-owned enterprise. So you have, for example, the Dominica Bureau of Standard, the National Telecommunication Regulatory Commission, you have Discover Dominica, you have Dominica Broadcasting Services, you have the Solid Waste Management, Dominica Social Security, Government Housing Loan Board, the WASCO, just to name a few. All of these entities, DAPSPA, DEXIL, all of these entities indirectly falls under the government. So you as a PS, depending on what ministry you are, for example, you have the Dominica State College. So the PS who is in education, where the Dominica State College would fall, would have to oversee some of that, would have to provide
Right.
advice.
Right.
Yes, you have some technical people there to assist you, but in the final analysis, you are the accounting officer. That's where the buck stops. And you find there is a lot of demoralization and inefficiency in public service. Let's look at political instability quickly, and I'll go down to a few others. You have, as far as political instability, you have frequent arrests and bogus charges brought against opposition person. I don't need to elaborate on that. We know it's right in our face. It's right in our face. Again, you have, for example, Thompson Fountain and those persons, 7 years, going on 8 just now? You say these guys try to overthrow you for truck or whatever. Well, bring the evidence and deal with it.
And get out of the
Within a
way,
year
yeah.
or two, you should say, well, this is what these guys did. This is the evidence against them, and find them guilty. You have these guys coming in and out of court for the last 7 years now. You are the one who take them to court. You must present the evidence of the guilt. You have to do it. So that, in my view, is instability. You had the alleged kidnapping of Chokski and the involvement of government in that. That's political instability. Denying citizens' right to protest. We know what's that's all about. Unlawful force on the residents and the community of Salisbury on two occasions. Two occasions. Then you have, for example, the arbitrary arrest of citizens. You arrest first and ask questions after.
Exactly. And
You
recently
know?
we had that incident of foreigners visiting the country being picked up at 6 o'clock in the morning and held for 7 hours and then just
Right.
released.
So that is some form of instability,
Mhm.
suppression of citizens' right to protest. Let's look at economic collapse. That's an area that tells you when a country is failing. High unemployment and inflation. The numbers speak for themselves.
Mhm.
Pockets of poverty in several communities across the country. You just have to take a trip around the country and hear the average man tells you his plea, what he's going through. You know, deteriorating infrastructure. You have the people of Petit Saba and Delices since Tropical Storm Erica, 9 years going on 10 years. You cannot have a bridge or a road rehabilitated to connect the communities. A weak private sector. We see what's happening in the private sector. There is no buoyancy there.
Mhm.
You
Even
know?
even today on one of the other radio stations, I heard one of someone who has a business in Roseau challenging. He said, I can give anybody $1,000 right now. They can show me anybody who have had an investment in recent years in Dominica that seem to be thriving
Yeah,
and making a
absolutely.
profit.
I
Yeah,
mean, those who are there right now are just making do. Like everything else, they have an investment. So, like the witch churches and maybe the Astafans and these folks, they can't just shut down and move, or jollies. They have serious investment. But in terms of the buoyancy of the economy, there's no buoyancy
there's no
taking place.
buoyancy at all. Mhm.
Poor agriculture sector, lack of feeder roads for farmers. We know the plight of the agriculture, despite what they might want to try and tell you. Inadequate banking sector. How many banks we have now in Dominica? Two, National Bank and the what's the other one? Whatever it's called.
Republic Bank or something,
We
yeah.
Republic. We are down
Mhm.
to two from maybe six banks a couple of years ago.
And look now,
That,
the same National Bank is struggling to even put together some statements for the
absolutely.
shareholders.
And that is a serious problem when the banking sector is so constricted that you don't have. It shows a lack of confidence in the sector. If I'm an investor from outside and I want to invest in Dominica, and I only know, well, boy, there's only two banks there. I mean, it's a chance you're taking.
Yep.
Okay. You have also an absence of a thriving manufacturing sector. What are we manufacturing? What are we manufacturing? Give me one item that you say we are manufacturing in bulk. One of the items that currently we could do so well in is water. Water is the new gold. Water is the new oil. So many countries are yearning for water. Do we have a serious water manufacturing plant in Dominica that brand our water as the best water in the world because of how it tastes and all of that? The poor and deteriorating health system. I don't even need to elaborate on
Yeah, we
that.
dealt with that
We
some
know
of that
what's
last
bearing
week.
upon the health
Last week on
system.
World Health Day, we had some unfavorable.
Inadequate and compromised education system. Tell me if I'm wrong. You have a state college that was damaged by Hurricane Maria how many years ago that is still not fully rehabilitated. You have one library in the country, one public library that has not been rehabilitated. One. I was in New York for the Easter vacation, Easter holidays. I spent about a little over a week. In that Brooklyn area alone, I'm talking about Brooklyn, little Brooklyn area where I was.
Brooklyn is why you're talking about Jesse. It's Flatbush neighborhood.
The little area that I was
Hmm.
in, Flatbush,
Hmm.
I think I saw at least 4 libraries in there, public library.
Yep,
Now, some may argue, well, people don't use library anymore. But if
that's
the
not true.
advanced countries have library like America and
Hmm.
Brooklyn, who are we to say we don't need a library? We don't even need one. I'm not saying we need 2 or 5, not even one.
I think we need 5. We need 10.
Okay.
And we
An,
don't have
in,
one.
an inefficient energy sector. Look the problems we had with Domlek, load shedding, no gas. Last Christmas or the Christmas before that, previously, there was gas shortage. Visitors on the country rent their car and they can't get gas because there's a whole gas shortage. Minister, what his name, come and talk a lot of nonsense to people as if people don't have a brain in their head. We saw what was going on with Domlek. Equipment that are 30 years old. They've been there 20 years. Why do you have equipment that old? What have you done? And guess what? The general manager resigned, she left. Barbados picked her up and offer a position that I think the title talks about something of transformation and something, a big position. She's going out to Barbados to help transform the Barbados energy sector, their light or whatever they call
And
themselves.
and they are familiar with her
Absolutely.
because the previous owners, the previous majority shareholders of Domlec also had shares in Barbados. And
Right.
so during that time, there was a lot of interaction between Barbados Light and Power and Domlec. So
So
it's
if
not it's
she
not by accident that they hire her. It's because they're
so
familiar
so if
with
she
her
was
with her
that
company.
bad and inefficient and don't know what she's about
Exactly. She would not have
and
gotten
do not
hired.
carry herself, you think Barbados would recruit and hire her among
Exactly.
all the recruits in the region?
Yep.
I'm sure that may have been vying for the position. Surely she will for salt,
Hmm.
but we lose her. Why? Because of politics. You heard the interviews that the prime minister had where he threw under the bus. You heard him. I don't need to repeat what he said. You have a high and poor debt management. A couple days ago, a couple times ago on your program, I mentioned a debt management report that was done by the World Bank that suggests where the debt of the government is not being properly managed. Okay? Is not being properly managed. And mention the number of inefficiencies as it relates to that. Again, we can do a session on that. It's right there. It's in the audit report. Okay. Then we have a high debt to GDP ratio. Dominica hovering at about what? 100% debt to the GDP ratio. It's right there. We're the worst. We're Kakarat within the OECS. I'm not even talking about the wider CARICOM. I'm talking about OECS, which is St. Vincent, Antigua, St. Lucia, Grenada,
Grenada.
and the OECS. We are the last Kakarat. Poor fiscal management. I've mentioned that already. We see what it's like. Degradation of the environment and the country natural resources. That's right down your field, Tony. You know what's happening. You see all the degradation that is taking
Yeah.
place.
Work going on is obvious an environmental impact assessment. It
Right,
either
right.
wasn't done or it's been totally disregarded.
Absolutely.
Um,
Then let's look at poor management of the CBI. That in itself is a story by itself. We dealt with that.
now,
Let's
now,
answer.
Alvin, as we talk about the CBI, I want to say something that there are a number of supporters and sympathizers of the government that try to ridicule the claim about the money that is unaccounted for. But everybody that know me knows that I like mathematics. I would like to ask them which part of the claim that you're disputing. Are you saying that the number of passports that is claimed to be sold is not is not the correct number? Are you saying that the price that they sell one of them is not the correct price? Are you saying that we cannot multiply, that if you do 100 times X, you get 100X, and that our math is wrong? Are you saying no, it's not true, that all the money is in fact in the treasury, we just haven't spent it as yet? Which part of the argument that you are disputing? Don't just come and say, oh, it's not true, and whether the argument is laid that so many passports were sold, this is the average price of the passport, therefore it will have generated so much revenue, this is how much that has been accounted for. Where is the difference? Don't just come and say that, oh, they try to make a ridicule out of it, and make jokes and say, well, it's missing this, and no. Come and challenge it in a logical manner. Treat us as though it is true. And even I will go one step further and say, that the passports belong to the people of Dominica.
Yeah,
The
it's
revenue that's generated belongs to the people of Dominica. We should not be guessing.
citizenship is in our constitution. That's what it
We
is.
should not be
It's in our
guessing
constitution.
how much money was generated. It
Yeah,
should be
yeah.
pretty
But
transparent and
yeah,
reported on
but you know,
properly.
Tony, again, these people are just being dishonest. Okay,
Yes.
I'll be honest with you. They're being
Uh-huh.
dishonest.
Yes.
And you and I know we have offered at least to one individual to come on this program. Come on this program and let's have a civil conversation about it. Let's discuss it. And again, like we said earlier, in the absence of a Freedom of Information Act, that's what happened. They're not obligated,
They're not obligated.
or they feel rather they're not obligated. And that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't get the information that we are entitled to as citizens.
Together we've been unaccountable. Yeah.
But it is clear, not just by what we are saying, but what the EU have investigated. So it's not forget what Alvin may say. Don't try to shoot down the messenger. The EU, in their deliberate assessment of the program, came to a number of conclusions. And we don't have to go in it yet tonight, but you know the list. There was a list of 7 or 8 areas that the EU, including saying in what the EU is recommending for us. And we like to say, oh, we are independent and we don't need people to tell us what to do, blah, blah, blah. But when we behave the way we behave, it allows for that. They said all monies must be deposited in Dominica. That's what the EU said, you know. Okay? That's what the EU said. And the EU went as far to say the price of the passports were too low. They were determining for us now what we should charge. The EU. So it is not a question when these folks talk. It's not what Tony Alvin says. Challenge the EU.
Mm-hmm.
And the same EU said, you know what? If you don't put your house in order, you cannot come to England unless you had a visa.
Yep.
And we know the what you call it, the challenges with that.
And the Canadians have already put that in place. Whereas
and while on that, let me say, it's my understanding, and if I'm wrong, please somebody correct me, that we have a shortage of passports simply because we have not paid the company that prints our passport for us.
In other words,
not only you can get a visa, you don't even have the passport. The visa into.
You're not feeding the goose that lay in the golden egg.
So if I'm wrong again, please tell me I'm wrong. I will accept. I will stand corrected. But imagine somebody in Dominica now who has an emergency, who needs a passport. I guess they must have contacts too, because if you don't have contacts, nothing happens. That's the only way they likely get a passport. And then hopefully to try to get a visa, because you need a visa now to go to the US. You need one for Canada. You need one for England. You need one for France, Paris. I understand you may need one, or you need one for Guadeloupe, Martinique. And that's where we are. Okay? And then, of course, in the area of security and security challenges, you have an ineffective law enforcement and political interference. We know about the police situation. We heard the Police Welfare Association just last year issued a scathing statement on what they are experiencing as police officers. And rather than the Minister for Security try to appease, well, not appease, but, you know, speak to the men and figure out what's going on, he tried to take them on the public radio, that they're out of order to say that and to do that and all kind of nonsense like that. But I would imagine that the welfare didn't just suddenly get up one morning and decide to do that. It was over a period of time. They don't have insurance. They don't have a uniform. They don't have shoes. They don't have equipment. They don't have vehicles to respond. They're living in shabby conditions. The same with the firemen, shabby condition. 3-4 men in one little area quarters with little maybe bunk beds. The superintendent of prison also issued a statement at the end of the just about the same time with the judge that we referred to earlier, and even there at the prison, you have what they said, 56 of the inmates there, a person that should not be there. They're mentally challenged people. The prison or the hospital, that's not where you have the people. But again, when we talk about our health system, We don't even have a proper health system where we can house these individuals, this 56 person who are mentally challenged, who should not be at the prison. They are the prison. You have the superintendent of prison says, he says there, he also told the court that prison officers are at the risk of having to break up fights between inmates doing homemade weapons, and the lack of insurance for prison officers is unacceptable while the officers are being attacked by inmates and they have to risk their life of their families and work long shift. That is the superintendent of prison that said that to the court at the end of the just concluded assizes. It's not Tony Alvin saying that. Isn't that a failed state, Tony?
So,
Right?
Alvin, we have to start wrapping up a little bit. But before we go, I wanted to talk about how, in general, how the postal service works. What are all the machinations that people don't see? People like me who are a layperson walk up to the post office, buy a stamp, send it, and we expect our package to get to where we want to go. There are indications that the postal service in Dominica is dysfunctional, especially on outgoing mail. I want you to explain to the listeners, because a lot of us don't know what's going on behind the scenes, how the postal service is supposed to work. And if it is really true that the service is falling apart, what implications that will have.
Let me first begin, Tony, by saying there is what is called the International Mail Agreement. Okay? And that agreement was through what is called the Treaty of Berne and was signed on October 9th, 1874. You heard it?
1874.
1874. Establishing what was then known as the General Postal Union. And it goes on to say the treaty provides that there should be a uniform flat rate to mail a letter anywhere in the world. Postal authority, that's the kicker there. Postal authorities should give equal treatment to foreign and domestic mail. It goes on to say that there is what is called a Universal Postal Convention. And that convention details regulations, embody the rules applicable for international postal services. And these acts are binding on all member countries. We don't have time to go into all of the convention. And as you know, on the 9th of October each year is what is considered to World Post Day. Then there is what is called the Caribbean Postal Union, of which all of the countries in the region, starting from Anguilla, the letter A, Antigua, Aruba, Bahamas, Barbados, Belize, you name it, British Virgin Islands, Canada, Caribbean, Netherlands, Dominican Republic, Cayman, you name it, are part of this union. And that too was established by treaty of the postal authorities of the following member countries that I just mentioned, among us. The bloc was established with the assistance of the European Union for member state of CARIFORUM as part of the bloc of African, Caribbean, Pacific states. And again, here's the kicker. It was founded in 1997 as a restricted union of the Universal Postal Union. So you see the relationship there, okay? Every year, they have what is called Postal Convention. The last one, I think, was held last year, if I'm not mistaken, was in Jamaica. And the countries are binded by these postal agreement and treaties. So if, as you're saying, Dominica is not receiving or sending out mails, then clearly they're in violation of the treaty and the agreement. Because there's what you call reciprocity. Reciprocity, meaning that you handle my mail, I handle your mail. You handle my mail, Antigua, I handled Antigua mail, Antigua handled Dominica mail, and vice versa throughout the region. So if there is a situation now, and again, from what I understand, Liat was the main carrier that was taking the mail out from Dominica. And we know what happened with Liat. So it means, therefore, that they don't have a carrier to get the mail out. They don't have alternative. They seem to don't have an alternative, which is, to my mind, ridiculous. That is where you call for vision and creativity
and management and governance of
and
the country.
management. And let's go back again to that PS that we spoke about. What is the PS under which the postal services fall? What advice is she providing or he's providing as it relates to that particular matter?
And what initiatives that they're taking to
What
head off a
initiative?
crisis?
To say, okay, well, Liat is no longer able to do that, but now we have a charter that we use twice a week.
But people fly out people fly in and out of Dominica every day.
You know,
And
but
Leah did not only go to Dominica.
But you see, again, Tony, it is just the callous attitude of this administration that they don't care about the local man. Because again, earlier on I mentioned the elite. The guys who are there selling and pushing passport that's making $1 million every year or $2 million, they can afford to walk into FedEx and send their documents out, or UPS. They can do it. But what of the average Joe Blow who depend on the post office to receive their mail from overseas and to send a mail out? What of them? Can they go to FedEx and pay that exorbitant price or whatever FedEx is charging?
$200, yeah.
You know? But it's again the clear indication of a failed state. I know earlier we talked about the Social Security and what's happening there. Do you know that as of the audit report that ended 30th June 2021, the Dominica government had a loan balance of $34 million with the Social Security.
Wow.
$34 million. And the National Bank, they had an overdraft, and we talk about the banking sector. And I can speak to that because I know about it, during the Freedom Party administration and even the United Workers' Party administration, you had Royal Bank, you had Barclays Bank, you had National Bank. What else you had?
Scotia Bank.
Scotia Bank.
Bank Française.
So the government, in terms of overdraft facility, would spread that overdraft. So let's say government wants $100 million overdraft. They would go to National Bank, they would maybe get 25. They'd go to Royal Bank, they would get maybe another 25. Go to Scotia to give them the aggregate of the 100 million. So you don't have a huge risk involved with any one institution. You know what that administration did? They had an overdraft facilities of over $150 million. And that was converted to a loan at the National Bank as of 30th. It shows under the audit report of 30th June 2021. $154,055,796.
Wow.
That is now a loan that the National Bank is carrying
for the government
of Dominica.
At the time when they're getting record revenue from passport sales.
Because they took an overdraft, and like everything else, they couldn't clear overdraft. But not overdraft, because you know how overdraft operate. It's like your own personal overdraft facility. You may have an overdraft with the bank, and
like
you use X amount, and you're supposed to clear the overdraft over a period. Exactly. So they couldn't clear the overdraft, and that was converted to a loan. So at the end of that period of 30th June 21, between the National Bank and the Social Security, they had a total of $188 million, $461,980 by way of loan. But here what
to local institutions.
To local institution. But here what the in that same audit report, here what the auditors reported as well. The Treasury Loan Register, because the Treasury is the one that keeps the register for loans as the accountant general. The Treasury Loan Register, and they were reporting, as I said, for 30th June 2021, has not been updated to include all loans issued by the state. And that comes as no surprise to me because I referenced a document a while back. So they're issuing loans, and the register is not up to date. So you don't know who's owing who and who's not.
Just a mess.
I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you. So Tony, in a nutshell, we are in a very sad state. We're in an area that we should not be as a people. Within the next 3 years, I would say, we should be celebrating. So, as they say, somebody's writing there, the regime is in violation of every act there is. The postal office has not been functioning for years, even before Lee had stopped operating. There were issues with mail going out and coming into Dominica. It was reported mail have been sitting in Barbados for years now. As a result, retirees awaiting their pension from the UK and Canada have not been able to access the mail. I mean, that's a travesty, you know. That can't be right. Yeah. That's a travesty of one thing.
That's sad.
But you know, sad. So there you know, there is so much going that is wrong. And as I said, we don't take pleasure in pointing out those areas because it's not.
Because it's a reporting of the suffering of our people. So we cannot take pleasure in that.
Yeah. You know? But they are a fact. They are a fact. There is no doubt about it. And like I say, there are several other areas. I mean, you have, for example, the human crisis, if one may describe it as that, where government have not adequately compensated residents of Wesley for their land that they acquired. Again, under the law is very specific how you treat with individuals that you acquire their land from.
Yeah, eminent domain, yeah.
So there is a violation of that act as well. Let's go back to, as I said.
As the listener said, they're in violation of every act.
You know? So will someone call and tell me, one of the acolytes, that what I'm saying is not true? Will they tell me it's not true? I mean, come on. These are facts. So I have pointed out so many areas there tonight. And I guess the question that maybe some are asking is, what do we do? What do we do?
Stand up, let your voice be heard. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm saying what we do, we have to continue to ventilate these issues. It is my hope, like I said, that those who matter will speak up. We know of that German what you call it, that German piece that says, when they came, you were not a Jew, they came for a thing, you said, I don't have nothing to do. Then when the time they come for, when it was your turn to come now, you had nobody to speak for you or to stand up for you, you know? So I think we all have a responsibility. And that is why I keep doing that, Tony. I mean, I could simply take the position of, you know what, to hell with it. I'll just enjoy what God has blessed me with in North America, and to hell with Dominica. But as a Dominican, I feel I have an obligation to speak truth to power.
Yeah, because if we don't do it, who's going to do it?
Huh? And like I always said, I don't come to those discussions just saying things at the top of my head. I can substantiate any one of them and challenge any one of them that I mentioned tonight. And I have had over the years the experience and the knowledge, having worked in the public service for many, many years, many years. I was the assistant secretary in the Ministry of Tourism. That's the position right next to the permanent secretary. I was actively involved in formulating and developing cabinet papers for the minister for submission to cabinet on policy issues, on a number of issues, preparing policy document, interpreting policy document, understanding the laws and the legislation. General Secretary was the same thing. I had to have a good knowledge of the industrial relations laws and the Constitution.
The Public Service Act.
Public Service, how it operates, the Public Service Act, general orders. As Postmaster General is the same thing again. So, and like I've told people already, I worked under all three administrations. I started off as a young employee at the time, young public officer in 75 under Patrick John. Okay? And we know what happened. And I worked the entire period under the Freedom Party Eugenia Charles administration. As a matter of fact, Jennifer Stephens was on a program not too long ago on DBS with Cecil. They call it de la Cour or some term like that, de la Cour, just going back, how you raised, blah, blah, blah. Very good program. I listen to it off and on. And she made the point when she was moved from PS to CPO, Chief Personnel Officer. And her first day as Chief Personnel Officer, her first day, I pull a strike on her. She said that, boy, and imagine that my first day on the job, I had to deal with a strike. She was then the CPO. Mr. Shaw was the CAPSEC. And we were in negotiation and they didn't want to budget, didn't want to do, and we pulled a strike. And there was civility. I was able to sit down across the table as the General Secretary and she on the other side as CPO and have civil conversation and arrive at some agreement with Mr. Shaw at the time. You know, represented all those people, represented Social Security, a number of different places as General Secretary. And then my last tenure was under the United Workers' Party government in the Ministry of Tourism, of where I played an integral part with the minister. If the minister is listening now, Mr. Norris Privo, he can attest to the work that I did in the ministry with him as minister.
And that was when that ministry was created, no? There was
Absolutely.
there was not a Ministry of Tourism.
That was one of my, I was charged with that responsibility of putting the ministry together based on my knowledge, my experience as a senior public officer, to set up the ministry. And the minister and I had a very cordial relationship, the PS and the various ministries. And my role as assistant secretary was a critical role. That we did so much in that ministry. I mean, it would take 2 free programs for us to go over some of the initiatives that we took during the time as Mr. Privo being the Minister of Tourism. This is what you call a Minister of Tourism, a go-getter. I mean, you talk about our sites, our cruise ship arrival, our hotel occupancy. I mean, you just name it, man. We were kicking butts. Okay? So I did that. And then my final stint before I migrated was the general manager of Kyrie FM. I managed that radio station for almost a year. So that's where my media part comes in. But prior to that, as general secretary, I had a very good relationship with fellows like, may so rest in peace, Ken Richard, Matt Peltier. Matt worked with me at Kyrie. Camilla Bellot. I mean, the names go on and on. Ivona. I mean, Carly, John Baptist. I mean, so many of them. They would flog my office general secretary when something is hot and try to see who get the news first. They try to see who get the news first.
The point is that when I have you on the program, listeners already know that what they're getting is not just somebody who's on the block just talking from his ears or from the top of his head. That you are steeped in what it's supposed to be, and therefore your analysis of what is and where we can improve has validity.
And I don't even, I don't even talk about
intimate familiarity with it.
I don't even talk about my role as on the Dominica Credit Union, Rosa Credit Union.
Right.
During the 10 years, Babs died as president, I was the vice president. You and I served on the supervisory committee, and I moved all the way to the board. That building that is in Roseau was one of our brainchild with Babs and Julius Timothy and all of us at the time. I served on that with the credit union for over 20-something years on the board, as not just on the board, but throughout my 10 years.
Throughout, yeah. You and I were on the supervisory committee together.
Right. And then I was president of the Dominica Cooperative League for a number of years, And here again, as I tell you, we did not allow our political preferences, if you call it that. Earl Williams was on the Credit Union League board. And you had people like me, so rest in peace, Clement Carty, Romus Thomas from Maho.
Ramos.
Yes, his wife is work at DCP. I mean, diverge political views. Diverge. One has their support, one body, one. And yet we were able to do things and never allow politics to interfere with what we're doing. Earl and I up to today are good friends. If I pick up the phone now and call Earl, whatever, what do you think about that? Bounce something through him. He'll call me, we'll talk. But we were not necessarily on the same political wavelength.
Point of view, right.
But we were able to have civil conversation on the issues and deal with it.
Yeah, but to come back to where we started and tonight's show of institutions and the role that institutions and robust institutions play in Dominica. Let's
That has
let's
gone.
let, let's
It's
let's bring
gone.
it to let's bring it to a close and let's point out to people how important that they are and if the government is neglecting institutions, we as a people should have to find a way to compensate for that. Otherwise, there are no checks
Well,
and balances. There are no avenues for redress. There is no channel for bringing information to the public for ventilating, as you say, the issues that are happening. So let's bring this conversation to a close with that.
well, I began with the Constitution and reference what it says about laws, institutions, what role you have as a citizen to play in that regard. And I would end on that and to say as well that the rule of law has 5 goals when we talk about the rule of law. And all of what we discussed tonight has, to a large extent, deal with the rule of law. Government should be of law rather than of men. That's our tenet, our JCI.
Yep.
And the 5 goals are: 1, making a state abide by the law. Making state abide by the law. And by state here, I'm talking about government and all the other various
The powers that be, yeah.
Yes. Ensuring equality before the law. So all this nolly pros that the DPP does and all this kind of nonsense and having people, dragging people before the courts for so many years without doing anything, clearly that is not equality before the law. Supplying law and order. And we heard what the judge said about that. Law and order in the country, what's happening.
And it should not be selective.
Providing efficient and impartial justice. Why do you have someone on remand for 10 years? My God. Justice delayed is justice denied. Where is their human right? Where is their right? And the final one is upholding human rights. All of that encompasses human right. Your right, your right as a citizen, your dignity as a citizen. And that, I read section C, but, you know, even section D in our preamble as well. I read C earlier, but D says, recognizes that men and institutions remain free only when freedom is founded upon the respect for moral and spiritual value and the rule of law. That's in our preamble. That's D. Earlier on at the start of the program, I read C. Recognize that men and institutions remain free only when freedom is founded upon respect for moral and spiritual value and the rule of law. So I'm saying in closing, Tony, that we have a moral obligation, you and I, and several of the other persons who have shied away from speaking, to speak to those issues. We don't have to, you know, we don't have to be disrespectful to the other side, but speak to those issues. And those persons who are elected into office has an obligation and a responsibility to tell us, a citizen, and to address those issues. The issue as it relates to the post office need to be addressed. The passport need to be addressed. The roads, the people at Pititsab and Daly says, why are you on God's earth you telling me that you have all this money coming in from all where and a road that got damaged as a result of a storm back in almost 9-10 years ago, you cannot have it repaired? People have to be protesting and demonstrating and doing all this nonsense. I mean, we don't even talk about the Chinese influence and how Chinese seems to have the edge over the local citizen. We don't talk about the truckers that don't get contract. We haven't even dealt with that. So I'm saying we have a responsibility, and it is my hope that sooner than later, that we deal with this thing. Because like I said earlier, a lot of us are talking about Haiti, what's happening in Haiti, and seem to feel, well, the Haiti situation was something that happened last year, last month. No, it's something that grew over a period and came to the head. And we may very well find ourselves in that situation. I hope not. I'm still hopeful. I'm still optimistic that there are folks like your platform, TDN Radio, and Civic Vibes that I do on a Sunday, and several other platforms, and people would see those things. One of the burning issues now is the question of electoral reform. Election has consequences. And if we don't elect the right people, then that's what we get. We get people coming to office that don't care about the citizens, that only care about themselves, that don't do anything that would uplift the ordinary man. So we have to get that right first. We have to get that elections right. How we elect people or how people find themselves. And until such time we get that right, as I said, we're the only island in the region that have not gotten it right for the last 20 years. We will continue to have that problem. Election has consequences, and we're seeing those consequences right before our face now as we speak.
So Alvin, I want to say thank you. Um, as usual, your gift is to take complex topics and break it down so that everyone can understand it without diluting the message that you bring. And so thank you for that. And thank you for all of the research and the preparation that you do. Listeners, I think you're so lucky. Listeners say therein lies the dilemma. No respect for the rule of law or constitution. Dominica does not have a government and is clearly in failed state status. And so, I think all has been said. There's nothing more I can add except to tell listeners to find a way to make your voice be heard and to take the action that you can take. Don't be surprised that this action that you take, well, even though it may seem to be small, you never know which action is going to be the spark. Do
Mhm.
the only obligation that you have is to do what is within your armpit, your reach, whatever is within the length of your reach, whatever is
Absolutely.
within your circle of influence. That is your responsibility. If it's beyond your reach or your responsibility, it's not yours, it's somebody else's. But if all of us do what is within our reach, we will see a difference. The last thing I will say, Alvin, is that, you know, I was reading up some work on the Grenada Revolution that went sour when Maurice Bishop, who was the leader of the revolution, and some of his colleagues were put on a firing squad and shot. And one of the things that I came away with was that they dismantled the justice system. And so when things started to go south, they didn't have a court to go for redress. So what I will say is that the same people who are dismantling the institutions and the same people who are supporting the dismantling of the institution, because for now they perceive it to be in their interest, you may find yourself in need of the protection of those very institutions that you are participating in dismantling.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely. You're
so
absolutely correct.
so when you see that people are not being served, that members of the opposition have a simple charge hanging over their heads and being dragged back and forth into court for 7 years, and you support it because it's your government in power, what happens the next time that it's you, or that it's your son who, for whatever reason, or your daughter who is associated with some incident, gets arrested and get taken up to stock farm for 5 and 6 and 7 years? And maybe because in a moment of emotion you spoke and you said, quote unquote, the wrong thing, so you fell out of favor, and you can no longer pull the string or go to your pal rep and get a favor. What happens to that when you broke down the institution that would have made it impartial? So you can rejoice, you can boast and say that you're on the winning team, but this is not a football match. This is not a cricket match. This is life, you know. And so we have to take it seriously, and we have to be more compassionate than we are. We have to recognize, even from our own selfish point of view, that tomorrow we may be the one that needs that institution. Tomorrow we may be the one that's knocked over by a car and we get disabled and we need our social security benefits. We may be the ones where our relative retires from the UK and depend on the postal service to work so that they can get their pension checks on time. Be careful what you support. Make sure that what you support is on the right side, no matter who is on that side. That's all I would say. That institutions are important, and we have to make sure that our institutions are strong. So, Alvin, I want to say thank you to
Yeah,
you for
yeah.
coming
Let
on.
me let me just say though quickly, if I may plug that in.
Hmm.
This Friday morning, at 10 o'clock,
Hmm.
from 10 to 12, I think it is, there is a free panel via Zoom. Panel on social security reform in the
Who,
Caribbean.
who's also in the
That is being
Caribbean? Okay.
moderated by our own Valder Henry, Dr. Valder Henry.
Mm.
And there are three panelists that's going to be there. I can always send you the link, Tony, and you could share it in the live.
Okay.
And that's the thing. When events like that are taking place and you have the time, you should plug into it
Yeah. The
and express
education.
your
Yeah.
view. Express
Hmm.
your view. Hear what the other side is saying. So I myself personally want I've registered already, and as I said, it is this Friday, the 19th of April, from 10 to noon,
Hmm.
and the topic is addressing social security reform in the Caribbean, being moderated by Dr. Valda Henry, and you have Joanna Borges, you have Stuart Haynes, and Reginald Thomas as the presenters. Given what's taking place now with our own social security in Dominica, it would be an interesting conversation to listen to and hear what are some of the best practices in the rest of the region, and what are some of the challenges. Because we know from what is being reported, seem to have some serious challenges. And you're talking about $900,000, almost $1 million gift to a top executive as a loan from people pension funds. That's a lot of money.
On top,
I mean, that's a lot
on
of
top of
money
millions of dollars of loan to government.
to government.
Yeah.
So I would encourage any one of you who have the time to educate yourself. And that's one of the problems that I would also want to reiterate. Too often we do not educate ourselves as citizens. Like I said earlier, we don't look at the Constitution. We feel it's beyond our head, and we don't need to look at it. We need to educate ourselves, and we can do so little by little.
Yeah.
Attend
Uh,
these
And
sessions, those meetings, talk to
it's
people.
it's a manipulation. We should not
Yeah,
allow ourselves to be manipulated. The
right.
system is deliberately designed to take
That's
our
right.
attention away from those things.
That's right. That's
And
right.
so we need to make sure that we're not manipulated and distracted. It's like you stand
And
there
stay
and
away from
somebody,
the fake news. Stay away from the fake news and get the
right.
real.
And you can only know if it's fake news if you educate yourself. Because
Absolutely.
if you're not in the habit of getting information for yourself, anybody that sounds convincing is going to convince you,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
attending sessions like that is what is required. Is the anecdote. The anecdote to fake
And
news is to seek truth on a continuous
that's right.
basis, not
That's right.
occasionally. You know,
That's right.
the antidote, I
And
should
we
say.
deal with the
Yeah,
facts and not shooting down the messenger. Listen to the
exactly,
issues.
exactly. So, Alvin, I'm going to let you go.
Thanks
Thank you
again,
so
Tony.
much. Uh huh. You're very
Always a
welcome,
pleasure.
man. You know
Thank
you're
you.
always welcome. You don't come enough. I would say, right? But when you
I
do, but when you
I
do come, you
I
make
have
up
to
for
send
it.
my retainer's fee.
When
I'm
you do,
retired now, so I need to work on a retainer's fee. Huh?
I will say that when you do
I
come,
will.
you make up
You
for the
talk to
time
Sam.
that you spend away. You know. So, listeners, I hope that
And,
you find all this information so relevant. Institutions are an important part of our democracy, of our life, and so we have to make sure that we preserve it. We preserve it. We preserve our freedom to learn. And so, as usual, Alvin brought it on tonight, and I almost didn't have to say anything. He carried it. So thank you, my brother. And we'll do this again next week, Wednesday. Um, Earth Day is coming up, so Earth Day is coming up, and so next week we'll be talking about that. What are we doing for planet Earth? That one little speck of dust that we are all residing on. We might be selfish and say that we will die before the world ends, but what about our children and our children? So, folks, have a great week. Remember last week I told you about the Pioneer Sports Club wanting, needing some sponsorship. Um, they want to send some of their team to Martinique, April 27th and May 8th. Mr. Coach Cedric Harris was asking us to ask you if you have the ability to assist them. So the Pioneers Sports Club is costing them about $400 per person, and they want to send a team of 16 people. So do your part, help them, and we wish them well. We wish them every success. When Dominicans do things in athletics, we see all the congratulations, and we're so proud, and we wave our flag and whatever and whatever. This is your opportunity to actually contribute to that success. So help them all, the Pioneer Sports Club, wanting to go to Martinique at to a sports meet on April 27th and on May 8th. All right, get in contact. If you don't know how, drop us a quick line at TDN and we will put you in touch with Cedric so you can make your contribution to him directly. All right, folks, thank you so much. And thank you once more time to my guest, Alvin Thomas. See you next week, Wednesday.